The United States was one of the first countries in the history of the world where Jews received equal rights. George Washington embraced Jews as citizens, and over the next centuries, prominent Jews earned a place in every field of American success. Yet Jews in America also faced brutal sweatshops, pressure to assimilate, anti-Semitic regulations, and even lynchings. So how did American Jews find a home in a land so full of contradictions? The first Jews came to the United States before its states even united. When Portugal drove out the Dutch from Brazil in 1654, a group of 23 Jews fled to New Amsterdam. Peter Stuyvesant, Director General of the colony, tried to push them out. But after 3 years of legal wrangling, they were allowed to settle in Manhattan as long as they did not build a synagogue or run for public office. In the 18th century, Jews from Germany and Poland crossed the Atlantic to find a new home and joined the revolutionary fervor of American independence. In light of this support, President George Washington wrote a letter to the Hebrew congregation of Providence, Rhode Island, stating, "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." American leaders were not always so welcoming, however. In 1862, General Ulysses S. Grant expelled all Jews from his war zone on flimsy accusations of war profiteering, despite the fact that Grant's own father worked with Jewish businessmen. Luckily, Lincoln interceded, saying he did not like to hear a class or nationality condemned on account of a few sinners. Grant would later disavow the order and become the first president to attend the dedication of a synagogue. Jewish communities in America flourished in the mid-1800s. In New York alone, the Jewish population skyrocketed from 6,000 in 1826 to over 50,000 by 1850. Jews like Marcus Goldman and the Lehman Brothers built financial behemoths, while Lazarus Strauss and the Bloomingdale Brothers created massively successful department stores. While these men built a vision of Jewish success, a massive influx of poor Jewish immigrants was just arising. In 1881, the assassination of Tsar Alexander II precipitated hundreds of violent anti-Semitic pogroms and the expulsion of Jews from Russian villages. This persecution forced more than 2.5 million Russian Jews to flee to America. In the United States, Jews became the heart of the textile industry and the political movements protesting it. The sweatshops that covered the East Village and other Jewish neighborhoods were brutal and exhausting places, where dry fabric could go up like a tinderbox, as in the famous Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire that burned 146 workers to death. Brutal sweatshops and squalid tenements forced Jews to reckon with the wide chasm between their lives and the American dream, and many of them decided to take action. Emma Goldman inspired Yiddish-speaking workers to strike, while Abraham Kahan, editor of the Jewish Daily Forward, became a beacon for the working-class struggle. While Jews were pillars of socialist and anarchist movements in New York and across the country, many also worked within the system. Oscar Strauss became the first Jewish cabinet member in 1906, and Louis Brandeis was appointed the first Jewish Supreme Court justice a decade later, becoming the first justice to champion freedom of speech and the right to privacy. While Jews influenced the politics and economics of America, America also influenced what it meant to be Jewish. Although the number of Orthodox Jews in America today make up nearly 10% of the Jewish population and is growing rapidly thanks to demographic shifts, Jews who immigrated in the 19th century tended to be more secular. In fact, observant Jews often described America as the Treifa Medina, the unkosher land. While many immigrant Jews did abandon their religion, others built the American Reform movement, which redefined Judaism by declaring that some traditional aspects, such as kashrut, were no longer binding. Services were often predominantly in English rather than in Hebrew, and they emphasized social activism, often portraying ritual commandments as obsolete. In 1885, a group of influential rabbis meeting in Pittsburgh declared that Reform Jews only had to follow the Torah's ethics and not its commandments or rituals. Reacting to this break from tradition, a group of rabbis founded the Jewish Theological Seminary Association in order to preserve the knowledge and practice of historical Judaism. The school became the source of the new conservative movement, which embraced the observance of the Torah, but remained open to innovations in Jewish law. For example, in the 1950s, they started permitting Jews to drive to synagogue on Shabbat, and in the 1980s, they began ordaining female rabbis. As these movements grew and shifted, they developed a distinct understanding of what it meant to be Jewish in America. Though Jews fled to America to escape the suspicion and hatred they faced in Europe, antisemitism proved hard to evade. Jews were often barred from clubs, turned away from hotels, and even excluded from certain professions, while Harvard and other universities instituted quotas to limit Jewish enrollment. In 1913, this bigotry turned deadly after a man named Leo Frank was falsely convicted of murdering a 13-year-old girl, despite an airtight alibi and a confession from another man. When the governor recognized Frank's clear innocence and commuted his sentence, a mob stormed the jail, kidnapped Frank, and lynched him from a tree. Bigots also sought to keep Jews out of the country entirely. Nativists pushed the Johnson-Reed Act through Congress in 1924, which severely constricted the immigration of Jews from Eastern Europe, while banning immigrants from some Asian and African countries entirely. In his Pulitzer Prize-winning memoir, Henry Adams, the grandson of John Quincy Adams and a supporter of the Immigration Restriction League, claimed that he wanted to keep out the furtive Jacob or Isaac, still reeking of the ghetto, snarling a weird Yiddish. The Johnson-Reed Act remained in place for 40 years and turned the rush of Jewish immigrants into a trickle. Yet many Jews who were already in the country, or who made it through the barriers, managed to thrive. They continued to suffer anti-Semitism, particularly with the rise of the American Fascist Party in the 1930s, but they managed to knit their communities inextricably into the American quilt. Jews made up most of the founders of Hollywood studios and wrote films like Citizen Kane and Sunset Boulevard. They pushed to eliminate the quota systems and collaborated with icons like Martin Luther King to fight for civil rights. They built illustrious careers across the arts, medicine, science, music, and law, pushing the fields forward into new possibilities. While America is far from perfect, it has become the second largest homeland for Jews in their long history. It's home to around 7.5 million Jews, according to the Pew Research Center, igniting a golden age that rivals even the great Jewish communities of the past.